Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Several months ago, last summer or so, before all of this hullabaloo in Venezuela and the big massive armada that was put into place there by President Trump took place, I wrote an article saying everyone should be prepared for a big foreign policy crisis. Now, again, this was before all this Venezuela stuff. Now, why did I say that? Well, because there was a lot of talk of resistance and opposition to President Trump's position on the Epstein papers. Trump and his allies were trying to keep the record secret, and there was rebellion afoot among the MAGA movement. There was resistance, there was opposition, which really had never happened before in Trump's MAGA movement. And so I said, well, be prepared for a foreign policy crisis in order to distract people, especially the MAGA people, away from their Epstein rebellion and rally around the flag and be exultant over an easy military victory and so forth. Now, and then of course, soon after that, President Trump starts amassing this giant armada there in the Caribbean, and then they start killing people in boats that are defenseless people who are supposedly transporting drugs. We don't really know if they have. None of them have certainly ever been convicted of that. They were just extrajudicial assassinations. That's what they were. But it got the MAGA people all excited. Man, look, hey, we're killing drug dealers and so forth. And then, of course, now you've got this military escapade that has been tremendously successful, killing communists, Cubans, and well, notice that the MAGA rebellion on the Epstein thing, it's over. It's over. They're all been enraptured by this Venezuela thing. Now, does that make me Nostradamus that I said this is what was going to happen? No, it doesn't. I just take it from what James Madison had said, that whenever you have a rebellion in he was talking about the old Roman Empire, whenever there was a rebellion afoot among the Roman citizens against the Roman Empire and the Roman emperors, that one of the favorite strategies of Roman emperors was to incite a war, some kind of foreign war against a barbarian or a terrorist or a dictator, whatever, that would cause everybody to rally to the flag, set aside the rebellion against high taxes, high debt, inflation, and so forth. And that was just a favorite tactic to get the rebellion quelled. And so I just took it from what Madison said about what the Romans did, and I said, I think Trump's going to end up doing the same thing. I think the national security establishment is going to do the same thing. They're going to move this rebellion off the table, in which they've done. They've been very successful. I mean, it was a very smart strategy. It was a brilliant strategy. But what I didn't see coming, I confess I didn't see coming, so which proves I'm not Nostradamus, right, is their willingness, Trump, and this to me strikes me as totally bizarre, their willingness to accept the continuation of the Maduro regime. In other words, they have this brilliant military escapade where they go in and they essentially kidnap Maduro. I mean, Maduro's appeared in court and said he's been kidnapped, and he clearly has been. And they succeed in this, but they don't have a regime change. They have a change in the ruler, but in terms of the socialist regime that Maduro is in charge of, that's been there for 20-something years or so, they've left that intact. I didn't see that coming. I guarantee you. I mean, this is really strange. So the vice president, Maduro's vice president, what's her name? Delcy Rodriguez, she's been sworn in as the interim president because, naturally they're not saying that Maduro's dead or anything. He's just been abducted. He's been transferred to a prison in the United States, but they still consider him the president, and for all practical purposes, he is still the president. Now, the reason I find this so bizarre is because it's not really a regime change operation, which is the modus of the national security establishment. Regime change and the anti-communist crusade, which you can see is still in their minds with respect to Cuba. I mean, it's been on their minds ever since the Cuban the Castro takeover in Cuba. The communists are coming. The communists are coming. That's what the whole Cold War was all about. That's what the whole assassination attempts against Castro were all about. The acts of U.S. terrorism and U.S.-sponsored terrorism inside Cuba. I mean, there's no question but that the U.S. government has always been the aggressor with respect to Cuba. Okay, we often are taught that it's different, that they're spying on the United States. Well, if they're spying, it's to try to figure out where the acts of aggression are coming, because it's certainly not without any intent or attempt to attack the United States. It's always been the other way around. And so they've always wanted a regime change. That's what the embargo against Cuba has been about. That's what the assassination attempts were all about, and the acts of terrorism. So you would have thought that here is this brutal, totalitarian, really illegitimate socialist regime. I mean, nobody doubts that Maduro lost the last election. I mean, it's very, very clear. The evidence is that he lost it by a wide margin. I mean, like 70-30 or something like that. But he has the national security establishment. Keep in mind that Venezuela has the same type of governmental system as the United States. They're a national security state. The United States is a national security state. So whoever has the backing of the national security establishment, the military, the intelligence forces, and so forth, is going to be the one that wins. And he has the backing of the national security establishment. Maduro did. So he just declared himself the winner of the election. And then his appointed people in the government said, we certify this is a valid election, and so forth. So he just remains in power. And when there's protests, he goes and shoots them or jails them, or has his national security state do it, which is kind of strange too, because Trump has now threatened Iran by saying, well, if you kill protesters, I'm locked and loaded and I'll come after you too. But here's a regime that does that to its own citizens in Venezuela, and Trump has said, we're going to keep that regime in place. Now, the leader of the opposition, of course, this woman named Maria Corina Machado, she's been waiting in the wings, saying that she's ready to take power. Now, it's not real clear how she was intended to take power, because she's never been elected. Maduro would not let her run. This other guy, I forget his name, who's living in exile in Spain, was the opposition candidate who clearly won. But everybody assumed, including Machado, that Trump was amassing this gigantic military force to oust the entire regime, a classic national security state regime change operation. Not just removing the head, but removing the entire body, okay? Because now they've got his vice president, and who's now in charge. Now, what Trump is hoping for is that she becomes his toady or his puppet, where she just is there to carry out his orders. And he's already said, I'm running Venezuela. Well, he's not running Venezuela directly. He's not there. He's not managing the levers of power like he does with the U.S. government. So the only thing he could mean by that is that he's got this toady, or at least what he hopes is a toady, there to just carry out his orders. Say, okay, look, I want you to give oil lease rights to American oil companies. I want you to deregulate this. I want you to privatize this. And in other words, in that case, he would be right. He would be running the government through her. She would be his viceroy, for example. It's not real clear whether she's going to fall into that role. She's given mixed signals. She says that Venezuela is a sovereign, independent country, and she's implied that she's not going to take orders. But then now she says she's ready to cooperate with Trump, so it's not real clear. But here's Maria Corina Machado, who wins the Nobel Prize, who's clearly the leader of the dissident movement there, she had every intention of being the person that replaces Maduro, along with an entire administration. Now, not clear what would happen with the national security establishment there, the military and the intelligence forces, and that's one of the reasons why Trump has decided to continue supporting this regime, which is a totalitarian socialist regime. It's no different from the Cuban regime that Trump and Rubio want to oust. But over here in Venezuela, they say, well, we want it to continue. And I think they felt that the national security establishment of Venezuela may not approve of Machado, might not follow her orders if she takes over, and that there was the possibility of civil war or violent conflict. And so they said, well, we want to maintain order. Now, she has got to be the most surprised person of all in this whole thing, because, I mean, before this thing, it was clear that she was the most sycophantic person you'd ever find, praising Trump, idolizing him, not daring to criticize anything he had, supporting sanctions against the Venezuelan people. I mean, the sanctions have been as brutal, if not more brutal, than Maduro's socialism, in causing massive suffering, economic suffering among the Venezuelan people. And she's never criticized the sanctions. She's supported the sanctions. Clearly, she had every intention of becoming Trump's toady. And so now what does she do? Trump has actually insulted her and said she doesn't have the respect or the admiration of the Venezuelan people, or words to that effect. And therefore, she just cannot be expected to be taking power. And that's why he's sticking with Delcy Rodriguez, who's part of this Maduro socialist, totalitarian, illegitimate machine. And so for a while here, Machado was silent. I mean, she's just like stunned into silence. Naturally, you would think she would be stunned, like, what do I do now? I've gotten on my knees and praised Trump, and I knew he was going to put me into power, and now he's dissed me. What do I do now? Well, the right thing would have been to criticize him. To criticize him for supporting the illegitimate regime that she says is illegitimate, that she feels should be ousted. And here's the President of the United States supporting this regime, continuing this regime. What does she do? She gives an interview where she continues to praise Trump. Oh, God. This is nuts. This is nuts. And the same with her supporters. Leading up to this military incursion where they captured and kidnapped Maduro, Machado's supporters, including libertarians, remained very quiet. Now, they didn't openly call for intervention because they knew that didn't go over well with libertarians when libertarians are calling for intervention. But their silence told everything. Okay, and most of them are conservatives anyway, but their silence said everything. That they never condemned the possibility that Trump was going to do this. What she should have done at that Nobel Prize ceremony, or at least the post ceremony where she gave a talk, was to tell Trump, butt out. Venezuela's for Venezuelans to handle. But she didn't. She was very quiet, and she was very clever. She just stayed silent on it. Didn't address the question, but it was clear that she wanted it because she figured Trump was going to put her into power. So now she's given this interview where she's praising Trump. I guess she still thinks that Trump will come to his senses and she can be made the toady, the puppet there that's going to be sycophantic to Trump and take his orders. Maybe that'll happen, but I think this is what I think. I think this situation is very, very potentially explosive. Because, look, there's people around the world, Venezuelan immigrants, who, of course, American statists hate. I mean, this is what's really ironic. They put on these sanctions that are really a war against the Venezuelan people. They're like terrorism. It's like, we're going to cause you massive suffering until you get rid of your ruler. And you haven't gotten rid of your ruler yet? Oh, well, too bad. We're gonna deport you. I mean, 8 million Venezuelans fled trying to save their lives. It was no different like with Iraq when they had the sanctions on Iraq, and Madeleine Albright, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was asked, are the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children worth it? Worth these sanctions? And she says, well, it's a difficult issue, but yeah, it's worth it. And so, yeah, it's worth 8 million Venezuelans leaving. But then when they come here to try to save their lives, you horrible invaders, you're just terrible people. You're just a bunch of gang members, and y'all all have tattoos, and we need to force you either into El Salvador, where you could get tortured and detained for the rest of your life, or back to Venezuela, where you're facing death. To Trump's credit, at least he's not saying, oh, we're doing this all for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. It's all for them. No, he's being honest. He's saying it's about the oil. He wants that oil there in Venezuela. But it's a very explosive situation, because here's people around the world, Venezuelan immigrants, that are celebrating. They're out there, in the streets. Yay, yay, Maduro's gone. Except for the fact that his vice president and his socialist machinery and his socialist system is still there. And notice something important. The dissidents in Venezuela, which is probably, I think Machado might be right, like 90% of the population that is being controlled by the 10%, they're not celebrating. Notice that they're not in the streets saying, hey, Maduro's gone. Are you crazy? The machinery's still there. They know that. And now it's a U.S.-supported machinery. It's a U.S.-supported tyranny, which is really no big surprise that U.S. supported Pinochet after they had that regime change operation in Chile, and they support this guy in El Salvador and Saudi Arabia. And Trump, was partnering there and making friends with the dictator in North Korea. So, supporting dictators is nothing new, but this is an explosive situation, because now you've got dissidents that were, I'm sure, praying for foreign interventionism to save them from Maduro. And, okay, they've been saved from Maduro, but now they got the same machinery supported by the U.S. And the sanctions continue. So the U.S. is continuing its war against the Venezuelan people, causing them misery, suffering, and death, as a condition that Delcy Rodriguez, the interim president, follows orders of Trump. If she doesn't follow orders, then the sanctions continue. The death, the suffering, the misery continues. That's a very explosive situation. At the same time, you've got Rodriguez exercising her control. I've never heard of this term called a state of commotion. She has declared a state of commotion. That's really weird. And the state of commotion is that these state officials, government officials, have the authority to stop anyone they want and search them. And search their cell phones. Does that sound familiar? This is what I keep saying, is that if you want to know why what's going on in the United States is totalitarian, just look at totalitarian regimes. That's what they're doing here. They're stopping people in the streets. They're searching them. You got troops in American cities. We've had a state of commotion here for certainly along the borderlands, but now expanding nationwide for a very long time. Checkpoints established, checkpoints on the roads and highways that subject people to searches. We've had that for a long time here in the United States. But the state is here, consider it freedom and totalitarianism there. But the MAGA supporters, I'm sure they don't know what to do either. Are they supposed to support this socialist system because Trump is supporting it? I'm sitting there. I'm sure they're sitting there scratching their noodles, like, what do we do now? Do we support totalitarianism? And everybody understands it's an illegitimate regime. If Maduro lost the election, that means his vice president lost the election too. And here's another irony of this thing, is that the indictment against Maduro in New York City says he was an illegitimate president because he lost the election. That's the U.S. government, the Justice Department saying that. They draft up the indictment. I mean, a grand jury issues it, but it's the Justice Department that draws it up, saying this is an illegitimate election. And yet here is Trump over here supporting the illegitimate regime that is still in power, that is arresting people and jailing people. In fact, this state of commotion entails ordering state officials there, government officials, to arrest anyone who participated or supposedly participated with the U.S. in the abduction of Maduro. So they're going to start jailing people for doing that. And that's what Trump is supporting now with his continuation of the regime. Now, you've got the national security establishment there, the military and the CIA. That's what Trump clearly was afraid of bringing Machado in. Is like, what would be their reaction? Well, they're sitting there ready. I mean, whatever happens, they've got the power. It's like any country that's a national security state. That's where the real power is. Same here in the United States. The real power is with the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. That's why the federal courts don't dare buck them. I mean, here they've been killing people in the high seas, despite the fact that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, clearly says you will not take human life without due process of law. Well, that's what they're doing. They're killing people for supposedly violating U.S. drug laws way over there. And they're killing them. And they're defenseless. They're not like firing guns at them or anything. The generals are there saying, oh, well, they might be throwing cocaine at us or something, you know. But nobody's going to buck the national security establishment. You're not going to have the Supreme Court declaring these killings illegal or unconstitutional. I mean, a long time ago, at least since the time of the Kennedy assassination, the federal courts, the Supreme Court, have made it very clear they're not going to jack with the national security state branch of the government. And it's a separate branch. Now, they and Trump are getting along right now, which raises another fascinating question is, how did they get Trump to be absorbed into this process? I mean, remember, Trump ran against this type of thing. No new wars, no aggression, deep state, drain the swamp. Same thing he ran on before. You don't hear anything about that anymore. You don't hear any exclamations he has against the deep state or drain the swamp. He's been absorbed by it, clearly. And he sends the CIA into Venezuela, which is really a paramilitary invasion. So he's not fighting the CIA, he's partnering with the CIA. But how did they get him to do that? Because he ran on a completely different platform. And he's become like every other president except Kennedy. Kennedy was the only president that took the national security establishment on. And he lost. That was what happened on November 22nd, 1963. And it was clear there was a new sheriff in town, one with all powerful powers of assassination, torture, indefinite detention, including against Americans. I mean, when they go and kill an Iranian general or they kill these little people in the boats, and it's immunity, it's impunity, it's total, absolute totalitarian-like power. And they wield it. Any national security wields it. And nobody's going to jack with them. So that system exists in Venezuela, and they're used to their largesse. And so, if the oil business starts to ramp up, American oil companies going in there, they're going to get their share, assuming this system continues. But it's explosive. It's potentially explosive because all the dynamics are in play. You've got massive numbers of dissidents that are very quiet right now. Not surprisingly, they'll be shot or killed. I mean, this lady, in my opinion, is no different from Maduro. Now, Trump's thinking, well, if she's smart, she'll follow my orders, because if not, I'll attack her too. I'll kidnap her and, I don't know, accuse her of being a narco-terrorist too, and bring her to New York for trial. Now, let me talk a couple things about this judicial process. It's really, it's just so weird, because they have this military invasion and they kill people to abduct this guy and bring him over to New York. He says, I'm a prisoner of war. This is a war situation. They've invaded my country. They don't have a congressional declaration of war like the Constitution requires, but the military was done to do this. And so the government's response, no, this is a criminal justice matter. This is a drug war. He's a drug war defendant. We're accusing him of drugs, along with guns, too. It's really weird. They're accusing him of violating U.S. gun laws. It gets stranger and stranger. And let me tell you why they grabbed his wife, too. Now, what I am surprised by was they didn't just kill him. Because that's what they're doing with the boat people. They're just killing them on suspicion of having transported drugs. We don't know if they have or not. None of them have been convicted. Under our system of government, when there's a suspected criminal offense, you take people into custody. You don't kill them. But they kill them because they're the national security state. They know the Supreme Court will never jack with them on this. Neither will the Justice Department or the Congress or anything. They're in control. So they're saying, well, no, this is a criminal offense. So he's not a prisoner of war. And so Maduro says, well, I'm a prisoner of war. And the federal judge says, enough of that. I don't want to hear that. You'll have time later on. And, Maduro should have just said, screw this whole system. I mean, he ought to be taking the position that the Chicago 8 did and showed no respect for this process at all. That federal judge he's just part of this whole system of military adventurism, invasion, wars of aggression, kidnappings, and he's just playing out his role in this. And Maduro should be scoffing and ridiculing, refusing to participate in this idiocy, judicial idiocy there, and tell the judge it's judicial idiocy. That's what he ought to be doing. But instead, it looks like he's being very respectful. I'm a good man and all this, But here's the irony, is that over here in the Caribbean, when they've been killing these people, these generals, these admirals have been saying, oh, there's act of war. What did Secretary of War Hicks said that? Oh, fog of war. Okay, when they double tap those survivors, when they just kill those people in cold blood that had survived the attack, they just went in, 30 minutes later and just shot them up. It's just incredible. They didn't have any authority to shoot them in the first place, shoot those boats. They haven't had authority, legal authority, moral authority to kill any of those boat people. All they had to do was demand their surrender, take them into custody. They never would have fought. You got aircraft carriers and B-52s and destroyers and all kinds of ships there. There's no way these boat people would have fought back. And they couldn't fight back anyway. The probability is they didn't have any guns with them anyway. But even if they did, a sidearm, a Glock, or a AR-15, it ain't going to do much to an aircraft carrier, I guarantee you that. And they should have taken them into custody, just like the Coast Guard does. But they killed them. And they're saying, oh, this is the fog of war. This is war. We can do this in wartime. We're soldiers. We kill the enemy. They're attacking us with their cocaine and stuff. Well, really? If it's an act of war, then what about Maduro's claim that he's a prisoner of war then? Oh, no, Jacob. That's a criminal justice matter. That's a drug war matter. Geez. And now let me tell you something else, why they grabbed his wife, Maduro's wife, because they grabbed them both, which is, like I say, really surprising. When he was trying to apparently make it to a safe room, and they could have shot him in the back, which they've essentially done with these boat people, but they didn't do that. And I wonder if they violated orders to do that, because it's really strange that they would kill all these boat people, but then not kill Maduro. And now they got to face a trial where he could get acquitted. You don't know, but the probability is they're going to offer him a sweet deal. And I remember Trump's already pardoned the former president of Honduras for massive drug dealing. And so my hunch is that the reason they grabbed his wife, it's a favorite strategy of the Justice Department. You grab a guy's wife, and then you offer him a plea deal, saying if you'll plead to this, as part of the deal, we'll let your wife go free. So they put a criminal defendant in the awkward position of choosing to go to trial where he could get acquitted, but where he could also get convicted along with his wife, where his wife ends up paying the price and going to jail too, or pleading out as a way to save his wife from the possibility of incarceration. And I think that's what this whole grabbing his wife is all about, is they're going to hope that he pleads, and then see, now they're vindicated because he's pled guilty, and he goes and serves some years in the penitentiary. Maybe even, they let him know what happened with the ex-president of Honduras, that, there's a possibility of a pardon if you play your cards right and you show you that you're repenting for what you did and all this, and you praise Trump for his wisdom and what he did to save your life by kidnapping you and all that. That's what my hunch is going to happen. They're going to offer him a sweetheart deal that entails his wife, which is really morally repugnant. I mean, it really goes to show the rot in this judicial system. And for the federal courts to be participating in this thing, I mean, you can tell it's just the rot of the drug war, of the empire, the national security state. It's just pervaded the entire governmental system of the United States. Not to mention the stultification of conscience among the American people, that so many Americans just cannot see the basic wrongfulness of killing people who are suspected, not convicted, but suspected. Even convicted doesn't give them the death penalty of a drug war offense. But that's what the drug war and the empire and the national security state and foreign interventionism have done to this country. That's Trump Watch for this week. Look forward to talking to you all next week. Thank you for your great support of FFF.